rained through her fingers. Page 2130. "I think you're out of your mind," snapped Elaine. She surged to her feet. "And I don't appreciate getting caught up in your schemes. I suppose you have to stay tonight? But I shall expect you gone tomorrow." He rose, too, with rather more elegance. "I'm sorry to have invaded your home and ruined your evening, Miss Smith. Thank you for your gracious offer of hospitality." He bowed, completely unironically. "Drat him. Please confine yourself to this area." However, she may have been living an uncivilized life for the past several months, but Elaine was not about to throw all social niceties out the window. She liked them. They gave her rules to follow in an otherwise chaotic world. Scooping up a protesting Tom, she gave Mr. Carstairs a final, frosty good night, so before sweeping away to her own sleeping area. Sleep, however, was long in coming. Elaine lay rigid under the covers, listening as Mr. Carstairs made his own arrangements. It didn't take long for him to settle, but his host spent a rather long time straining her ears in the darkness. Her hand clenched around the bottle under her pillow. The moon set and the sky lightened to grey shadows before she fell asleep. Elaine awoke to find her unwelcome guest gone. The attic felt airier, roomier, emptier. It was odd how much space one more person could take up. What an impression a man could make in the world. It was a trick Elaine had never learned. Mr. Babcock continued to call her Elizabeth until the day of Lydia's ball, though she'd been a part of his household for almost 2 years. Mrs. Babcock had often looked at her with faint surprise between her brows, as if she'd forgotten the poor relation living in her attic, before sending her off on some vague errand. And Lydia, well, Lydia had been bright-cheeked and starry-eyed, brimming with youth and good health and an endless list of pleasurable pursuits. She had been kind to Elaine, in her own self-centered way. Elaine had not minded. Lydia's escapades had soaked up all attention, left everyone else too breathless to trouble overmuch with the odd addition to the house on Marine Parade. Elaine was even thankful for the attic room they'd given her, though Mrs. Babcock had promised it was only a temporary situation while the guest rooms were repapered. By the time the workers departed, however, Elaine had made the space her own. She was glad she had done so. If she hadn't been in the attic, if she had been invited to the ball, if she had envied enough to peep between the balustrades at the glittering crowd below, then she too. Elaine threw off the covers and sat up. She dressed quickly in her warmest layers, listening for the creak of floorboards. Hearing none, she thrust her hand under the pillow, retrieved the vial, and thrust it into her pocket. Then she combed out her hair, braided and pinned it with efficient fingers. As long as she kept the tears close, it'd be fine. Aside from a neatly folded curtain and a leather satchel on the chest, there was no sign of Mr. Carstairs. The window was shut. He hadn't left that way. The door, on the other hand, was unbolted. Elaine took hold of the handle and paused. Twice in less than 12 hours. Had she, when she wasn't looking, suddenly become brave? Or was fear, after all, propelling her? Elaine opened the door, shut it behind her. This time, she ventured down the dim passageway towards the stairs. She didn't get far. The floor underneath shivered. Footfalls sounded on the stairs. Tom bounded up first, a pale, leaping form. Behind the cat, a dark head appeared in the stairwell, then broad shoulders, then the rest of the man. Mr. Carstairs was frowning, and the look in his narrowed eyes was preoccupied. With the laughter gone, his was, Elaine thought, a stern face. He noticed her waiting silently, and the frown disappeared. His lips curved into a pleasant smile. "Good morning, Miss Smith." In appearance, he was no less the ruffian he had been last night, dressed in drab, ill-fitting jacket and trousers, and yet, he had that gentlemanly demeanor overlaying it all. Was he a rogue pretending to be a gentleman? Or the other way around? Either way, the teasing laughter came far too readily to his face. Elaine mistrusted it. She inclined her head in greeting, still silent. Give people enough room in a conversation and they felt duty-bound to fill it. I was taking a look down below, said Mr. Carstairs. Taking a look. He spoke the words so casually, but then he hadn't watched life played out in those rooms below, by people who were now no more. There's more damage than I thought. Of course, it's not only the deep that rose up to engulf Brighton, but all the creatures that live within it. Dark tentacles and sharp teeth. Screams abruptly cut off. Blood in the water. Bad memories. Miss Smith. He was closer than she expected. His voice low and kind. His hazel eyes concerned. She'd always thought hazel eyes were nice and honest. And he seemed sincere. But who really knew with people? Elaine turned away. It's time for breakfast, Mr. Carstairs. Getting breakfast was a longer, noisier affair than normal. She wasn't used to having someone else around, especially someone with a multitude of questions, who took up far too much room and was always underfoot as she moved from chest to hob grate and back. At least he was good at lighting fires. As Elaine ladled porridge into porcelain soup bowls, Mr. Carstairs examined the water butt and the system of pipes that led into it from the roof. You usually have enough water for your needs? He queried. Yes, he would know how rainy this part of England had become. He had no reason to suspect her of using charms to coax water out of the humid air. Come, eat. They ate around the writing desk. It had Grace Mrs. Babcock's sitting room until she'd overturned a candle and burned a spot in its rosewood surface. Elaine found herself staring at the scar as Mr. Carstairs ate with all apparent enjoyment. Your breakfast will get cold, he finally said, gesturing at her bowl. Elaine lifted a spoonful, then let it drop down into the mush with a soft splutter. What's it like? She asked. Outside Brighton. In the past half-year, the rest of England might as well have ceased to exist for her. On the surface, it's much the same as it had been. But, here he rubbed his chin in thought, under the false brightness, there is unease, because what happened in Brighton could happen elsewhere. It's not a good time to be a magician, then, Elaine said. He shrugged. There are those magical fools emboldened to show their hands, and try to carve out another piece of England for themselves. Elaine winced. Magicians, Mama had told her, should always live humbly and quietly, because no matter how powerful the magic, the mob was always stronger. Always. She struggled for a response. The Merlin must have his hands full. Again that daredevil gleam, that secret laughter. It makes it easier for me to do my job while he's chasing the next Yorkshire witch, or the Nottingham nabob. How fortunate for you, Mr. Carstairs narrowed his eyes. What about you? Elaine's heart beat faster. She forced herself to meet his gaze in the innocent, round-eyed way Lydia had often employed. What of me? How long will you stay here? He made a small gesture, but it encompassed all of Elaine's world. As long as I can. It's safe here and it suits me. She ought to warn him at least. Outside, in Brighton, there are things, fairy creatures, not the kind you would ever want to meet. And even if I managed to leave Brighton, she was talking too much. Elaine pressed her lips together. There's the Merlin, he said softly. He knows. Elaine drew in a breath, but said nothing, held his gaze, daring him to continue. This isn't sustainable, he said, with that awful gentleness. I know on my way back, he began. You'll be running with his minions at your heels. Don't bring them to my door. But Mr. Carstairs was looking at the window. Too late, he said. Elaine followed his gaze. Her heart jumped, her stomach lurched, a scream died in her throat. Splayed against the window panes was a spider-like creature. Elaine had an impression of elongated limbs and pale, bulbous eyes. Before Mr. Carstairs sprang up, quicker than thought, his hand shot towards the window. A flicker, so brief Elaine could not be sure she had indeed seen it, and Mr. Carstairs hauled the creature inside by its neck, as if the window had been no more substantial than air. Elaine squeaked. So did the creature, now tossed to the floor. It quivered against the floorboards, a tiny being with stick arms and legs and wide eyes. "What is it?" Elaine whispered. "Hobgoblin," said Mr. Carstairs briefly. Of course, thought Elaine. She still sat, her hands gripping the delicately carved arms of her chair. Her legs had turned to water. She didn't trust them to support her weight. Mr. Carstairs lifted the small creature by its collar and gave it a good shaking. "What were you doing here? Who sent you?" The hobgoblin writhed and twisted against his grip. "Ow!" it squealed. "Let me go, Tove. I'll tell you. So let me go." Mr. Carstairs set it ungently on its feet, let go of its collar, and crossed his arms. His face was grim. "I'm waiting. Word went out this morning," burst out the creature. "Possible human invasion last night. We was told to search. Reward was a whole human from the prisoners." "Prisoners?" Mr. Carstairs' eyes narrowed. "There were survivors." "And what do you mean by whole human?" pressed Elaine. The hobgoblin gave her a look that clearly expressed his opinion that she was a widgeon. "Good eating on a whole human," it said. Elaine's stomach roiled. "You eat people." "Not me. But I trade with them that do." The hobgoblin gave her another one of those looks that questioned her intelligence. "The prisoners?" prompted Mr. Carstairs. "How many of them?" The hobgoblin shrugged. "Mayhap 100. Less than there used to be. They keep dying." "There were other survivors." Elaine's head spun. She thought they had all died, that she was the only one. The world that had been so small yesterday had suddenly opened up, become bigger and fuller of inhabitants, darker and more dangerous. "Where are they kept?" persisted Mr. Carstairs. "At the pavilion." The hobgoblin threw a shrewd look at him. "I'd think twice for rescuing them. They're alive at His Majesty's pleasure and he don't like anyone bothering them. Just ask the imps and mermaids who tried. Actually, you can't, on account of them all being dead." The last was pronounced with grisly relish. Mr. Carstairs said coolly, "I'm not interested in anything that would weigh me down. Where are the searchers?" "All along the coast, Marine Parade, Regency Crescent, and the like." The hobgoblin's lip jutted out belligerently. "I told you what you wanted. Now let me go, and let you tell tales out of school." "I think not." Mr. Carstairs grabbed the creature with one hand, the other he drew out of his pocket. Glittering powder puffed into the hobgoblin's face. The creature spluttered, sneezed, then suddenly went limp. Mr. Carstairs let go and the hobgoblin thudded onto the floor. It lay there, limbs sprawling, a beatific smile upon its face. The smile did not improve the hobgoblin's looks. "Sleep dust," said Mr. Carstairs by way of explanation. "It'll be asleep for 2 or more days and half sprung for hours after." He held out a restraining arm as Elaine stood up. "Don't come closer. I don't want to have to carry you across Brighton." Elaine stiffened. "Surely there is no need for that." "No," he agreed. "I expect you, being a governess, have good legs and a strong constitution." He picked up his leather satchel and slung it over his shoulder. "I meant," said Elaine, "surely there is no need for me to leave." "Don't be a goose-a-cap, girl," snapped Mr. Carstairs. "Didn't you hear? There are search gangs all up and down the coast.